With the release of Eberron Forge of the Artificer and the mini-book Netheril's Fall, we had a combined total of 17 magic items added to the game, and I thought it'd be fun to go over them since what more do players love looking at than perspective loot? It's the best. Now you may notice that the 9 items that were added in Forge of the Artificer technically were all in the game before, but they were Artificer infusions, which essentially gated them behind having an Artificer in your party, and some had some fairly high level restrictions. So there's a reasonable chance that a lot of people have never actually seen, encountered, or used any of those items. But now they're just part of the game itself and aren't restricted to a specific class feature. These items can now just be given out during basically any campaign. And as for the magic items in Netheril's Fall, as far as I can tell, these are all actually new. So today we're going to go over the 17 new magic items that have been added to the game, and go over some of the things that they can do. We'll go through them all alphabetically, starting with the items in Forge of the Artificer, and then again for the ones in Netheril's Fall. First up are the Boots of the Winding Path. This is an uncommon wondrous item that requires attunement. With it, the wearer can use their bonus action to teleport up to 15 feet to an unoccupied space that they can see, provided they have occupied that exact space before during the same turn. Probably the single most obvious use of this item would be to move up to an enemy, make an attack against them, and then teleport away without provoking any opportunity attacks. Because basically, even though every class pretty much has some kind of Misty Step type ability, why not just slap it as well on a pair of boots? In all seriousness though, the best part of these is that they don't have any limited usage per long rest or charges or anything like that. They are infinite use, which makes them really great. I can also envision some more fun or creative uses where you sneak up on someone, pick their pocket or steal something, and then just immediately teleport away. Or maybe you grapple an enemy, jump off a ledge, let them go, and then teleport back to the ledge that you were standing on, all without needing to burn a single spell slot or even have spells at all, to be honest. I think these are such a fun item that open up tons of creative opportunities for players to think of. Before looking at the next item, we have smashed that goal of 25,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so thank you all so much, and I'm so excited to see if maybe we can get to 26,000 now. Thank you so much for your continued support, it truly means a lot. If you'd like to help me on this quest, subscribing to the channel and clicking the like button while you're there help way more than you might realize. Thank you so much. Next up is the Dazzling Weapon. This used to be called the Radiant Weapon when it was an infusion, and I assume that they changed the name to not cause any confusion with the Radiant damage type, since this item has absolutely nothing to do with Radiant damage. Otherwise, it works the same as the old infusion did. This is a rare weapon that can be used with any simple or martial weapon, and it requires attunement. It grants a +1 to attack and damage rolls, and with a bonus action, you can cause it to shed bright light for 30 feet, and then dim light for an additional 30 feet, and you can extinguish it with another bonus action. Additionally, the weapon has 4 charges. After you're hit by an attack roll, which can be melee, ranged, or a spell attack, you can use your reaction to expend 1 charge and subject the attacker to a DC 15 Constitution saving throw. Failing which, they have the blinded condition until the end of their next turn, and the item regains 1d4 expended daily charges at dawn. This is a pretty solid item. The baseline of it being a +1 starts strong, but being able to impose the blinded condition can be particularly great, especially if the creature has multi-attack. Say a mage with Arcane Burst strikes you, even if they do it from 120 feet, there is no range restriction on this item. You can potentially blind them, causing the rest of their attacks on not just this turn, but their next turn, since the condition persists through the end of their next turn, so we're looking at up to 5 attacks here being made at disadvantage. This is legitimately very good. Plus, any allies attacking will then have advantage on attack rolls against that creature as well. Sure, the mage is just one particularly good example, but there are tons of similar creatures where this can be extremely effective with. Next up we have the Helm of Awareness, which is a wondrous uncommon item that does not require attunement. With it, the wearer has advantage on initiative rolls. This is just extremely powerful, especially since it doesn't require attunement. Being able to go early during combat can be critical, especially when so many modern monsters have incredibly high initiative modifiers. On top of that though, this stacks with other effects that give bonuses to initiative, like the Alert Origin feat. I do think that this is the only one of the items that has changed since the old version. The infusion in Tasha's also made it so that you could not be surprised, provided that you weren't incapacitated. This version does not do that. Now, Surprise has changed in 2024, giving you just disadvantage on initiative rolls, so with this item, you'd just be making it at a straight roll. But it would still have been nice if it did prevent surprise. There's not much else to say about this, it's just really good. Moving on, we have the Manifold Tool, which is a common wondrous item that does require attunement. With the item, you can take the magic action to touch another item, usually a tool of some kind, and transform it into a set of artisan's tools of your choice. Regardless of which tool we create, we are considered to have proficiency with it when we use it. This is probably among the least obviously cool or flashy ones, but it still does have some legitimately good uses. On top of all of the other crafting options that this opens up if you were so inclined, each set of tools also has something that you can do with it by taking the utilize action with it, like brewer supplies allowing you to detect a poisoned drink, cartographer's tools letting you draft a map of a small area, glassblower's tools letting you determine what substance the glass held within it in the last 24 hours, or even cobbler's tools, which allows us to give someone advantage on their next dexterity acrobatics check. And yeah, all of these are pretty simple things, but they are fun to explore, and outside of combat, these to me are always such fun ways that the group can interact with and help townspeople or resolve some other problems. They're just fun. I don't think this needed to require attunement though, that feels a bit over the top for it. Moving on, we have the Mind Sharpener. This is an uncommon ring that does require attunement. With it, when we fail a Constitution saving throw to maintain concentration on a spell, we can take a reaction, expend 1 charge, and succeed instead. The item has 4 charges and regains 1d4 charges daily at dawn. This can obviously be incredibly clutch to have as a spellcaster. It can be particularly helpful during the early phases of a campaign, particularly in tiers 1 and 2, where your modifier just might not be all that high, leading you to potentially drop concentration more frequently. That said, even in higher level play, enemies are dealing more damage and hitting more frequently, so there's still certainly a case to be made. It's also just more likely that at that point you might have something more valuable to attune to. In any case, the Mind Sharpener is a very potent item that most casters would be very happy to have on hand. Next up, we have the Repeating Shot, which is an uncommon weapon that can take the form of any martial or melee weapon that has the ammunition property, and it also requires attunement. So just to clarify, this means that it works with light crossbows, short bows, slings, blowguns, hand crossbows, heavy crossbows, longbows, muskets, and pistols. So it's honestly a pretty wide variety of weapons. What it does is provide a +1 to attack and damage rolls, and allows you to ignore the loading property if the weapon has it, which can be a pretty restrictive property. So the subset of weapons that has a loading property are light crossbows, blowguns, hand crossbows, heavy crossbows, muskets, and pistols. Also, the weapon automatically produces ammunition for itself if it lacks it. This is just cool, and opens up the ability to use other weapons that you might not have wanted to because of the loading property, especially if you didn't take the crossbow expert feat. Anyone making use of ranged weapons, especially those reliant on crossbows or firearms, will certainly want to grab this at some point during their adventures. Next up is the Repulsion Shield, which is an uncommon shield that does not require attunement. While you have the shield, you gain an additional +1 to your AC, and whenever a large or smaller creature within 5 feet of us hits us with a melee attack roll, we can take a reaction to expend one of the shield's 4 charges to push the attacker up to 15 feet away, and the shield regains 1d4 charges daily at dawn. Something I wanted to point out about this, and I'll use the example of the mage again just for consistency, though this is true of a ton of new monsters, many creatures that have ranged attacks also allow for a melee attack roll to be made as part of that same attack. And I don't mean that you're just targeting something within 5 feet while you're still doing a ranged attack. I mean that many attacks have the melee or ranged qualifier within them. Again, the mage's arcane burst says melee or ranged attack roll, and it has a reach of 5 feet, or a range of 120 feet. The point of me explaining this is that to say that for many, though not all, the melee option on a typically ranged attack would still enable this to function, so it would work against a melee arcane burst, for example. Anyway, this is just obviously very good. Force movement is generally very powerful, especially when your party or even ourselves, we set up some dangerous things to be pushed through, like spike growth or spirit guardians, or even off of a ledge. There's a lot that you can do with this, and it can be very handy to have in a lot of different scenarios. Next is the Returning Weapon, which is an uncommon weapon that can take the form of any simple or martial weapon that has the thrown property, and it does not require attunement. So the weapons that qualify for this are daggers, hand axes, javelins, light hammers, spears, darts, and tridents. This provides a +1 to attack and damage rolls with the weapon, and makes it so that it returns to your hand immediately after you use it to make a ranged attack roll, regardless of whether or not it hits. This honestly kind of feels like a must-have item for anyone that's relying on thrown weapons, unless your DM just says that you have an infinite supply of daggers or something. If not, you're definitely going to want to grab this on your character. And finally, for the items in Forge of the Artificer, we have the Spell-Refueling Ring, which is an uncommon ring that requires attunement by a spellcaster. While wearing the ring once per day, you can use a bonus action to recover an expended spell slot of level 3 or lower. This is obviously quite strong. Though again, it is one of the items that is particularly good for a lower level caster. By the time you're entering, say, tiers 3 or 4, you tend to have more lower level slots than you are realistically going to use, and you're often just burning through them for things like shield, so this can give you an extra one. But again, at higher levels, you just probably don't need it. But in tier 1 or even early tier 2, if you can get your hands on one of these, it can represent a pretty significant bump to your power, especially since it can be done during combat with just the use of a bonus action. Overall, I think the items that were added into the mix from Forge of the Artificer are pretty good. There's a good balance of options available to martials and spellcasters, but crucially, I don't think that the spellcaster options are relevant for as long as the martial options are, which is genuinely a good thing. Next, let's take a look at the new magic items from Netheril's Fall. First up is the Arcane Battery, which is an uncommon wondrous item that allows the user to use the magic action to touch it to another magic item that has charges that are regained daily to have it immediately regain 1d4 plus 1 charges. Once used, the battery loses its magic. One thing to note, that despite this being a single-use item, it's technically not a consumable, so it does not benefit from the faster or cheaper crafting rules if you wanted to do that. Generally, this item is fine. The fact that it's single use does definitely hurt. I feel like it should have maybe its own charges, which could be pretty funny to charge the battery with another battery and have an infinite daisy chain of arcane batteries charging each other. Either way, there's plenty of magic items with charges, including some that we saw already on this list, like the Dazzling Weapon and the Repulsion Shield, but also things like Wands of Magic Missiles. There are a bunch of items that can take advantage of this, so it certainly does not hurt to have, but it's just unlikely to be something that's extremely critical. Also, since it takes an entire action to do, you probably aren't going to want to do this during combat, but who knows. Next up is the Brooch of the Elements, which is a rare wondrous item that requires attunement. The way this works is that when a creature within 60 feet of us hits a target with an attack roll and deals damage, we can expend one of our 3 total charges, which are fully recovered daily, to change one damage type of the attack to Acid, Cold, Fire, Lightning, Poison, or Thunder. This is an interesting item because my gut said initially that it was kind of bad. The obvious thing to do with it would be if a character has their best attack that say deals fire damage, but the target creature is immune or resistant to it, to then just change it to something else to still yield the benefit of the high damage output, but not to have to deal with the immunity or the resistance. Or better yet, if it's one of like the 12 creatures that has a vulnerability, this can work with those too. But then I realized that the inverse might actually even be better. This item does not need to be used on an ally or even a willing creature. So if an enemy attacks an ally and you know that that ally has an immunity or a resistance, you can change the damage type to that, which can legitimately be a great use of your reaction. Plus, if you've got an Arcane Battery on hand, you can just keep this up and going for a while. I think it's actually a great item. Moving on, we have the Fork of Eddy Summoning, which is a rare wondrous item. This allows us as a magic action to tap the fork against any object to summon an Eldritch Eddy in an unoccupied space that is as close to us as possible. It's friendly to ourselves and our allies, obeys our commands, and takes its turn immediately after ours in the initiative order. If we issue no commands to it, it just defends itself. It lasts for an hour until it dies or until we dismiss it with a bonus action. Once we do this, we can't use it again until the next dawn. Just so everyone is clear, an Eldritch Eddy is essentially this unstable whirlwind of evocation magic that crackles with fire and lightning. Anyway, the stat block itself is quite solid. It's a challenge rating 6 large construct, it has an AC of 11 and 144 hit points, it's got a walking speed of 10, but a fly speed of 40. And other than wisdom and strength, its saves are all pretty solid, plus it does have the magic resistance trait to help out quite a bit. It also has resistance to force damage and full immunity to fire and lightning and a bunch of conditions. With its action, it has multi-attack and can make 2 attacks using Searing Swipe or Arcane Bolt in any combination. Searing Swipe is hitting with a +6 to hit and a 10-foot reach, dealing 13 average damage, which can either be fire or lightning, we get to choose. And Arcane Bolt has a 120-foot range, dealing 14 average force damage on a hit. And it also has its Eldritch Overload reaction, which triggers when the Eddy takes damage, and subjects any creature of its choice within a 5-foot emanation centered on itself to a DC 14 strength saving throw, failing which they take 2d6 force damage and is knocked prone. Honestly, the Eldritch Eddy is a genuinely powerful companion to have on your side, especially since there's no sacrifice to your own action economy to use it. It just gets a full turn of its own after hours, and we can summon a new one every single day. This isn't even something that's like, it's good for a specific build, it's just good for anyone. Moving on, we have the Hat of Vortexes, which is an uncommon wondrous item that requires attunement. With it, we can opt to take the magic action to expend one of its 3 charges, of which it recovers all daily. And when we do expend the charge, we can release a magical vortex from it. The vortex fills a 10-foot cube originating from ourselves and lasts for 1 hour. The space the vortex occupies becomes difficult terrain. I don't think this is particularly game-breaking or anything, I can see some uses of it to block off or really just slow down an exit or entry point into any particular location, potentially scaring someone from wanting to do it at all. You do need to be essentially right next to the location when you release the Vortex, so it's not like you're launching this from range or anything like that, which does further limit its functionality in combat as well, as it does make it harder to lock enemies into a certain location when you need to be that close to it. It's not impossible, just more challenging. This one seems more like a fun item than a strong one. Next up is the Magen Handbell, which is a rare wondrous item that lets us take the magic action to ring it and summon a Terran Magen that appears in an unoccupied space within 30 feet of ourselves, obeys our commands, and takes its turn immediately after ours during the initiative count. It lasts for an hour until it dies or until we dismiss it with a bonus action, and the bell can only be used to summon it once every 1d6 days. Now, if you saw my recent video about the deadliest new monsters that were added to the game, you might recognize the Terran Magen, as it was, in fact, on the list for the deadliest CR8 creatures. I went into more detail in the video, but it was largely there for its monstrous 21 AC, solid hit point total, fly speed, and its multi-attack that allows it to deal close to 60 average force or thunder damage across 2 successful hits. And it also has Disintegrate prepared, which is pretty legit for a summon to have. This thing is just insane. But it's not all good news, since there is a big downside here. With the Handbell, once the Magen becomes bloodied, so when it drops to half hit points or lower, we need to roll a d6 at the beginning of each of its turns. If we get a 6, it goes Berserk. While Berserk, it does not obey our commands, it can't be dismissed with a bonus action, and instead of acting normally, it just attacks the closest creature that it can see. This can include our allies. It remains Berserk until it disappears, or until the person that's holding the Handbell takes the influence action and succeeds on a DC 15 persuasion check to control the Magen. This is a very high risk, high reward thing to use. While you've got it out, this is a monster on the battlefield and can help immensely, but if it ends up going Berserk, it can quickly turn into a liability. Next up we have the Mask of Changed Appearance, which is a common wondrous item that does not require attunement. With it, we can take the magic action to expend one of our 3 charges that regenerates 1d3 charges at dawn. When we do it, we can change our face's appearance, but we're not talking massive changes here. It's more just minor cosmetic changes, like deepening or smoothing wrinkles, accentuating bags under eyes, whitening teeth, and things like that. The changes also just last for an hour. There's definitely some light, fun social elements that you can use for an item like this, but I don't think it's doing all that much, and that's coming from someone that absolutely loves Disguise Self. Next we have the Mythellar Bracelet, which is a wondrous common item. The bracelet has 3 beads on it, and we can take the magic action to pluck 1 bead to gain advantage on strength athletics checks for 1 minute. Once all 3 beads have been plucked, the bracelet loses its power. This can be fun and useful in some exploration situations where you know you're going to need to clear a long jump or scale something challenging or move or push something big. Being able to give yourself advantage on the check, especially since it can also stack with things like guidance, is pretty good. Items like this are just fun treasures that you can have players find or have them available for cheap in some shops too. And our final item is the Mythellar Cloak, which is a rare wondrous item that requires attunement. While wearing the cloak, we can take a bonus action to expend 1 charge and for 1 minute gain a fly speed of 30 feet and the ability to hover. Additionally, once per turn, if we hit a creature with an attack roll, we can cause them to take an additional 1d4 radiant damage. The cloak also has 10 charges and regains 1d10 charges daily at dawn. This is a pretty nice bonus to have, especially since it's a cloak, so we can just stack it on top of the armor that we might be wearing. So with little sacrifice, obviously other than another cloak that we might be wearing, you can gain a fly speed and a small damage bonus. It's not terrible. So that's it. Those are all the new magic items from both Eberron, Forge of the Artificer, and Netheril's Fall. Let me know your thoughts and check out some of my other videos, but otherwise, take care.